This is Seeking Catharsis, a real victim's chronicles of covert narcissistic abuse. Today I'd like to talk about living with a narcissistic person. I'm starting to call it for what it is because I'm realizing more and more that everything in our lives revolved around him for the most part. There were times where I was the focal point in our relationship and he did things to support me in my endeavors, and I am and was always grateful. But most things were within the context of his life and his interest and his relationships, and I was okay with that. As I said, I wasn't from the area. I relocated shortly before we started dating, and he was a native of the city that we were living in and had deep roots, had a lot of family, had a lot of friends, and his entire professional working career was there. So it made sense that most things would revolve around his life and his background. I did have friends and friends from college, friends from high school. I had a few family members in the area as well. So I had my own network that existed before we met. But for the most part, most things revolved around his life and activities that his family and friends were doing in the area. But I want to talk more about living with someone like him. When we moved in together, he had lived with me and my relative for about a year. He had sold his home around the time that we had started dating. And because we were just dating maybe 5-6 months before then, and the prospect of not being able to see each other as much was like wearing on both of us, I had asked him if he'd be interested in moving in with me where I was, since we had space, and that meant he didn't have to move in with relatives and he could kind of have a little bit more freedom, and we decided to move forward with that. And so for a little bit over a year he lived with me, and it wasn't an ideal situation, but we did learn how to live in a small space together. We got along very well. He was moody, but that was part of his personality as far as I knew. But we didn't get into arguments and disagreements that were combative. We would talk. We would communicate, I think, in a very healthy way. And we had our own separate lives, so I worked somewhere, he worked somewhere. We were in similar fields, but not quite doing the same thing. So we had a nice, I would say, work-life balance and relationship balance. When it was time to find another place to live, and when that process started, my partner at the time would invite me to come see some of the places to see how suitable it was for us. And there was this underlying expectation that we would be living together. We were dating, we got along well, we just seemed to really hit it off, spent a lot of time together. And so we would go together to look at places, and he would get my opinion when we would walk through homes and see if it was feasible for us and the potential of our growing family in the future. And we finally found a place. It was smaller than any of the other places we had looked at in the past, but the market had been heating up so much, and he had a contingent sale. He needed to sell another property in order to afford the next place. So every time there was an offer that was put in, it was not accepted because it was contingent, and the sellers wanted a sure date to close, and didn't want to rely upon someone selling their home in order to close on the transaction. So what became available was something that wasn't on the market, and that had a little bit more time to close. So this happened to be a 2-level penthouse condo that was in a building that he said he'd always wanted to live in. And it was small, but we could work with it. I mean, we had been living in much smaller quarters for the year prior, so it really didn't bother me much. Also, I'm pretty flexible, so I tend to see the glass as half full. So I just thought of this as like, okay, here's an opportunity to live in a different space from the relative, and we could kind of just start living our lives together in a home with just us and get, it was kind of exciting to cohabitate like that. So once I moved out, I wound up leaving all the furniture that I brought with me from my hometown at my relative's house because they didn't have as much furniture as they needed for the home that they were in. And I thought, well, they could use it more than me. And my partner had said, why don't you just leave the stuff here? We don't need to bring it with us. I have a bunch of furniture in storage from the sale of my larger home the year prior. And so it was like, great, that's fine. But I did bring a set of nesting tables. They were clear acrylic nesting tables that, they were tiny. But that was the one piece of furniture I did take, or I guess not one piece, but the only pieces of furniture that I had brought from the home into our new home. So when we finally got settled into our new home and started to make it into a place that was comfortable for us, almost everything in the space, from the artwork to the accessories to the larger furniture, everything had come from his old home. And his home that he had before was much larger, so he had a lot more furniture. And he was really into collecting beautiful vintage furniture and mid-century modern, and he had a great eye. So again, I'm very easy to I go with the flow. So, I didn't have any issues with his furniture. It wasn't offensive to me. I thought it was beautiful. He had plenty of it. He actually had to sell quite a bit of it for everything to fit into the home because it was so much smaller than any place he had lived in prior. But when we got all settled in, about a few months into our move-in, and this move-in took place after a renovation that I actually managed. I was not on the title. I did not purchase the home. I was his girlfriend, and what I did was just contribute to the construction portion of it. So while we both had full-time jobs, I had made accommodations to be available on site to oversee the workers because my background was in construction. So this was right in my wheelhouse. And as long as I had a hotspot, I could do my work as I needed. And so I was able to spend time overseeing the renovation. When the renovation was done and we were all settled in, I noticed that he would make comments about my nesting tables. These 3 almost invisible pieces of furniture seemed to really get under his skin. And he just would pick with them. It was just always, why don't you get something different? Why don't you get something with drawers? Why don't you get something that's more like in line with the rest of the furniture in the house? And I'm like, okay. I was like, I have this. It doesn't really matter. Like, I don't want to spend any more money on stuff. Like, these are good enough. It's just a bedside table to keep things there. But he would often just make comments about it. And when we would be out and about looking at different furniture pieces, because that was just something he enjoyed doing, and I started to enjoy doing it too because it was a whole new world. He would always make comments. Well, do you like this? Do you like this? Like, what about these tables? And I just didn't see the point in wasting money and spending money on something that, it just wasn't that serious. It was a bedside table. I only used it when I was in bed. But I noticed this pattern of singling out the things that belonged to me. And this wasn't only in the household. I also noticed it in storage because once I relocated from my relative's house and both of us relocated, we had to put some of the stuff that couldn't fit in this smaller home into storage. And he had 3 times as much stuff as I did. I mean, he's just like, he collects furniture, he collects clothing, he just has a lot of everything, a lot of shoes, a lot of jackets, a lot of coats, a lot of hats. He just collects a lot of stuff, and I think it's great if that's what he's into, but I didn't have as many things. He used a lot more of the closet space. Like, everything was just like, he had so much stuff, and I was okay with my little portion of space because I didn't need a lot, and I didn't collect as much, and I didn't own as many things, and it just wasn't that important to me. But whenever we would have to go to storage to swap out our clothing for the different seasons, for the seasonal changes, he would always get in these like funky moods, and he would be just so not nice while we were there, and I'd be trying to help, and he'd be like, I can do it myself, and he'd just be kind of snappy with me, and his mood would always change when we were in storage together. And then he would make comments like, we need to save money, we need to get a smaller storage, and you have too much stuff in here. And it would always blow my mind because I really didn't have as much stuff as he did, like not even remotely, not even if you like try to stretch that. I just didn't. I didn't own as many things as him. I just didn't. But he would always try to make me feel as if I was taking up more space than I should have. And that was just, I don't know if that was, it seems like it may have been part of the abuse, just this feeling of unease that he was trying to impart on me. When I was just comfortable and just kind of like, okay, this is our storage, and our stuff is in here, and we'll just have to do this every 3 months. And I just kind of looked at it in a different way. But he would always say, I don't have enough space for all of my stuff. And he had, like I said, just way too much stuff than like the average person, let alone the average man. But he had so many things, and I didn't even have half of the closet in the master bedroom or in the bedroom. I didn't have half of the closet. I maybe had a quarter of the closet. He had 3 rows of shoes. I had half a row. Like, everything was just imbalanced, but he would often make these comments that he didn't have enough space for his stuff. And it would make me feel as if I was taking up too much space. And it was illogical because I wasn't. So those were some of the things that he would say and do. And it would just leave me feeling like, oh man, like, am I like crowding our space? And I wasn't. Like I said, I only had these 3 nesting tables. I had clothes, but I used up a quarter of the closet in the bedroom. I barely used any of the storage in the common areas. And it was frustrating. And so that was always something I was feeling. Like he was making me feel, it made me feel sometimes like I was taking up too much space. And then sometimes when I would go home to visit family and friends, or to do like a side gig with a family member that I did business with on occasion, sometimes I would come back and there would be different pieces of furniture. He'd gone out and bought something, and piece of furniture, relocated some pieces. And I always thought he had good taste, so I didn't really say anything. But what I did notice was that he wasn't consulting with me. He didn't ask what I thought about something, or, hey, do you think we need this? I would just it was almost like in response to my leaving for the weekend, it was like he would do something to assert control in the space. And I would come back and I'd be like, oh, wow, what happened here? Like, this looks good. Like, where'd you get that from? And he'll tell me, and I would never say, to him, why didn't you like you didn't want my opinion? Because I just felt like, okay,